Antiquity Unveiled, the most marvelous revelations of the 19th century concerning the origin of Christianity, by Jonathan Manning Roberts. And we start here with Pontius Pilate. My greeting to you is this: I was appointed procurator of Judea in the commencement of the reign of Octavius Augustus. At that time the Jewish nation was in a very turbulent state. Many men were brought before me on all kinds of charges, for these Jews were the most bitter sectarian bigots in regard to their religious views that I have ever met with as a mortal or spirit. There never was brought before me such a man or so-called God as the present Christian system claims. There was a Jesus Onanias who was tried before me for highway robbery and was crucified by my soldiers. But of the now renowned Jesus I know nothing whatever. In their Jewish ceremonies conducted at their own temple in Jerusalem, they were just that kind of there was just that kind of element to control as are the Jews of the present day. They were divided into 3 or 4 different sects. Each of these was striving to become the master of the others. It required the whole military forces under my command to prevent them from murdering each other in their own temple. At the time of my procuratorship in Judea, there was a great influx of visitors from all over the East, wise men so-called, who came there for the purpose of trying to understand the Jewish rites and ceremonies. But they were so strictly guarded in their worship that they would allow none to communicate the secrets thereof. So it couldn't have been God's religion if it was for somebody, if it wasn't for the people. You know from history that it was the Roman policy to conquer and rule all nations by allowing them to enjoy, without interference, their respective religious systems. And you see in Tanakh, the Ha-Kahanim are the enemies. The priests that control the access were never sanctioned by God, but they were the enemies of the prophets. We did this simply because we found that religious ideas have become so rooted in the minds of different people that they would be subservient to us just as long as we would allow their religion's free scope. Now I want to enter into further particulars. There was a sect of Jews called Essenes. They were what you moderns call communists. They believe in having everything in common. They were also guided by the same principles that now govern the Shakers. The whole Christian story was conceived and framed among the Essenian Brotherhood, who were hermits and lived apart from society. Christians today cannot prove anything about their man-God, and all their hopes would have been overturned and destroyed, but for the destruction by the Mohammedans of the Alexandrian Library. Christianity would not today have any foothold if it had not been for the Mohammedans. What? So I know it was a spirit, and it was the Christians, it was the Mohammedans, it's, a lot of natural fires, it could have been no one. But Islam has never been an Acts 19:19 sort of destroy the media of the other group, particularly by force. They can thank the bigotry of the latter for the success of their own religion. I was procurator in Judea in the 4th year of the reign of Augustus, and we find that Muhammad was accepted as leader by a majority of people who absolutely did not believe in him as a prophet, because they realized that he was somebody who could give them the freedoms and let each group have their own thoughts and whatnot, and he never tried to enforce religion. I was procurator in Judea In the 4th year of the reign of Augustus, I held the position 9 years. In the latter part of my life, I was banished for participating in a revolt at Rome, and I died at what is known to you as Trieste in Austria on account of being banished. This was the whole sum and substance of my career. As I hope for a happy spirit life, I can say I know nothing of any person, Jew or Gentile, of any Jesus, excepting the one mentioned in the communication, I am Pontius Pilate. Now, Pontius Pilate would have not called himself a Gentile. A Gentile, well, unless he was a staunch atheist. It's like, yeah, I turned my back on God. Yeah, I'm completely outside the realm of any... yeah, he could have been smug enough to do that. But typically, you wouldn't find anybody to call themselves a Gentile, because Goyim is quite the insult to the character. It's not saying, oh, he's not a Jew. No, saying somebody's a Goyim is something far different. This communication from Pontius Pilate is positively confirmed at the present time by the gifted, alerted Rabbi Wise, who journeyed to Jerusalem ostensibly for the purposes of obtaining, if the gospel account of Christ's trial before Pontius Pilate and condemnation to be nailed to the cross was true. The learned doctor says he searched diligently the records of Pilate's court, which are preserved for the trial of Jesus, but it was not recorded. He found the record of all sorts of criminals, both of a high and of low degree, but the name of Jesus of Nazareth was not there, and never had been. Thus, it appears that this most important spirit testimony as to the trial is confirmed by one of the most gifted minds of our day, who personally investigated the records of the court of Pontius Pilate, only to find out that what is taught in the Christian churches today regarding the so-called personage of Jesus Christ is entirely without foundation. Now, if Ananias was tried and crucified between a couple fellow thieves, a couple fellow robbing thieves, wouldn't that confirm that there is a character behind that part of that story? But definitely not the person that any of us look up to as Jesus. The testimony from Rabbi Wise comes to us almost 10 years after the spirit of Pontius Pilate had voiced through the medium his important statement, viz. That no such person as Jesus Christ was ever tried before him, as set forth by the Christian writers. Rabbi Wise, no doubt after making the long journey to Jerusalem, earnestly and truly investigated the matter to learn whether the Christian Gospels were correct. This testimony is disinterested, but goes far to prove that these ancient spirits are coming to earth for the sole purpose of bringing light to mankind, who have been misled and are groping in darkness, mystified by these false teachings. Now, why can't it be a bunch of jinn who've been here before even the humans and saying, well, here's some people that we can, direct towards our ends a little bit, and they're open to it, so let's do it. Day by day and Sunday after Sunday, according to what is termed the Apostles' Creed, millions of Christians repeat the religious exercises, crucified under Pontius Pilate, etc. Yet in this 19th century evidence, which cannot be set aside, reaches us not only from the spirit of Pontius Pilate, who above all others should know the truth pertaining to the question under consideration, but from a distinguished individual on the mortal plane who unknowingly corroborates the Spirit's testimony. We can readily infer the investigation by the learned Rabbi Wise that the other claims of the so-called Christian religion, if fully investigated, would prove to be myths also. In view of these remarks, we leave the reader to his own reflections, believing that the key we have furnished is sufficient to unravel the mysteries hitherto concealed in the compiler. So you know, there was more groups, but if there were more groups of the Christians, if there were more groups of the Jews than the four mentioned, isn't it perfectly reasonable for us to step forward and say, wait a second, maybe the fact that Jesus is not mentioned, you know, it doesn't mean what we think it means. And we can also say that, I mean, the Essenes weren't one group. The Essenes were a whole series of groups. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and the, who was the Samaritans? Yeah, Samaritans were definitely considered part of the. They were definitely Jews. Pentateuch, the 5-book sort of Jews. So there's a lot to be said, and a lot that can be said with the actual Bible itself. At some point, I do plan to go over old Bibles and share them, and it turns out there's over 100 different King James versions. I'm not going to just say whatever King James version I can get my hands on, but you will see differences in Bibles appear on my channel at some point, or, if I live for that and the channel's maintained.